My name is Clarissa Davenport, and I'm 33 years old. For the longest time, I thought I had it all: a loving husband, a best friend who was like a sister to me, and a life that seemed as close to perfect as anyone could hope for. My husband, Marcus, and I had been married for 7 years, and in all that time, I never doubted his love or loyalty. And then there was my best friend, Evelyn Monroe. Evelyn had been by my side since college. She was the one who held my hand through breakups, celebrated my wedding like it was her own, and even helped me pick out the perfect home for Marcus and me. But life has a funny way of showing you how blind you've been, doesn't it? It all started on an unassuming Thursday. Marcus had been distant for weeks, claiming work was eating up all his time. Evelyn, ever the supportive friend, encouraged me to be understanding. "You know how hard he works, Clarissa," she'd say, flashing her disarming smile. "Men like him just need space sometimes." I trusted her. After all, she was Evelyn, my confidant, my sister in all but blood. One day, I decided to surprise Marcus at his office. I figured a homemade lunch and a little affection might help ease whatever stress he was under. As I walked into his building, clutching the bag of his favorite pasta dish, I was greeted by his secretary, Naomi, who looked uneasy the moment she saw me. "Oh, Mrs. Davenport, huh?" "Marcus isn't here," she stammered, avoiding eye contact. "And where is he?" I asked, my heart sinking a little. Naomi fumbled with her words before blurting, "He left for a long lunch meeting with Evelyn." Evelyn? My Evelyn? I tried to dismiss the gnawing suspicion that began to creep in. They'd been friends, too. Maybe it was innocent. Maybe it was business. But deep down, something didn't sit right. That night, I couldn't shake the image of Marcus and Evelyn together. I replayed every interaction we'd had recently, every time Evelyn had brushed off my concerns about Marcus's distance, every time Marcus had conveniently been too busy to spend time with me. The pieces started to click together in a way that made me feel physically ill. I decided to investigate. Over the next few days, I paid closer attention to Marcus's behavior. He was always on his phone, guarding it like it held the nuclear codes. Evelyn, too, had grown strangely evasive, canceling our weekly wine nights with flimsy excuses. My gut told me something was wrong, but I needed proof. One evening, Marcus fell asleep on the couch, leaving his phone unattended. My hands trembled as I picked it up. I knew this was a line I could never uncross, but the need for answers overpowered my guilt. What I found shattered me. There they were, messages between Marcus and Evelyn, explicit, intimate messages. My stomach churned as I scrolled through their exchanges. They'd been meeting in hotels, sneaking around behind my back for months. The betrayal was so thorough, so calculated that I couldn't even cry. I was numb. The next day, I confronted Evelyn. I invited her over under the pretense of catching up, and when she arrived, I wasted no time. "How long have you been sleeping with my husband?" I asked, my voice cold and steady. Evelyn's face went pale, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. She tried to deny it at first, but when I showed her the messages, she crumbled. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she sobbed. It just did." Her words ignited something in me. All the years of friendship, all the memories we'd shared, they meant nothing now. Evelyn was a snake, and Marcus was no better. They hadn't just betrayed me, they'd humiliated me. That night, I packed a bag and left. I needed time to think, to figure out my next move. But as I sat alone in a dingy motel room, one thing became clear: I wasn't going to be the victim in this story. They had made their choices, and now they were going to pay the price. When I left that night, I wasn't just escaping the wreckage of my marriage and friendship. I was plotting my return. Betrayal is a bitter pill to swallow, but it also sharpens your focus. As I sat in that dimly lit motel room, staring at the cracked wallpaper and listening to the muffled sounds of traffic outside, I realized something. I had spent my whole life being the good girl, the forgiving friend, the accommodating wife. Not anymore. Evelyn and Marcus had made me their fool, and they thought they could get away with it, but I wasn't about to let them walk off into the sunset while I licked my wounds in silence. No, I was going to make sure they felt every ounce of the pain they had inflicted on me, and then some. The first step was gathering evidence. The incriminating text messages on Marcus's phone were a good start, but I needed more. I needed to know every detail of their sordid affair, the dates, the places, the lies. I wanted a timeline that painted them as the deceitful hypocrites they were. To do this, I enlisted the help of someone who owed me a favor, my cousin, Alina. Alina worked as a private investigator, and while we'd never been particularly close, she was fiercely loyal to family. When I told her what Marcus and Evelyn had done, her outrage matched my own. "I'll dig up everything," Alina promised, "and when I'm done, they'll wish they'd never crossed you." Within days, Alina delivered. She had photos of Marcus and Evelyn together, holding hands at a cafe, checking into a hotel, even kissing in a parking lot. She'd tracked their movements, pieced together their lies, and compiled a dossier so damning that it left no room for doubt. But my revenge wasn't just about exposing their affair. That would be too easy. No, I wanted to dismantle their lives piece by piece, the way they had dismantled mine. And so I began to lay the groundwork for my plan, but first I had to play the part of the oblivious, heartbroken wife. I moved back into the house, feigning reconciliation with Marcus. He was surprised but relieved when I told him I wanted to work things out. "I just need some time to heal," I said, forcing tears into my voice. "But I think we can get through this."
Marcus, ever the narcissist, believed me. He even started trying to win me back, showering me with compliments and small gestures that only fueled my anger. He had no idea I was biding my time, quietly collecting every shred of financial and personal information I could use against him. Meanwhile, I reached out to Evelyn. It took everything in me to stay civil, but I needed her to think I was considering forgiving her too. "You were like a sister to me," I told her over the phone, my voice trembling with feigned emotion. "I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust you again, but I don't want to throw away all those years of friendship." Evelyn, guilt-ridden and desperate to redeem herself, took the bait. She started confiding in me, telling me how guilty she felt and how much she regretted her actions. I pretended to listen, all the while taking mental notes of everything she said. Every tearful confession, every detail she shared, it was all ammunition. The next phase of my plan involved their reputations. Marcus was a rising star in his field, a marketing executive with a spotless public image. Evelyn, on the other hand, was a freelance event planner who prided herself on her connections and professionalism. I decided to hit them where it hurt the most. Using a burner email account, I anonymously sent the photos and evidence Alina had gathered to Marcus's boss. I framed it as a concerned colleague who couldn't stay silent any longer. Within a week, Marcus was called into a meeting and placed on leave pending an internal investigation. The fallout was swift. Clients started pulling contracts, and his reputation took a nosedive. For Evelyn, I took a different approach. I created a series of fake online reviews for her business, claiming she was unprofessional and unreliable. I even posed as a disgruntled bride whose wedding she had allegedly ruined. Within days, her phone stopped ringing and her calendar of events began to clear out. But I wasn't done yet. The final blow was personal, and it required patience. I knew Evelyn and Marcus had been planning a romantic weekend getaway, and I decided to crash their little party, literally. With Alina's help, I found out where they were staying and booked the room next door. I arrived unannounced, armed with copies of the evidence, and made sure to confront them in the most humiliating way possible. The look on their faces when I barged into their room was priceless. Marcus stammered, Evelyn cried, and I smiled. "I just wanted to make sure you both knew what it feels like to be blindsided," I said, tossing the evidence onto their bed. "Consider this a preview of what's coming." Their panic was delicious, but it was only the beginning. I still had more cards to play, and I wasn't stopping until they both paid the price in full. When I left that hotel room, Marcus and Evelyn's stunned faces etched in my mind, I felt a surge of satisfaction unlike anything I'd ever experienced. But satisfaction wasn't enough. They had torn my life apart, and I wasn't going to stop until every piece of their fragile existence crumbled at their feet. Back home, I took my time dismantling Marcus's world. I'd spent 7 years as his wife, and I knew every skeleton in his closet, every crack in the perfect image he presented to the world. My next step was financial. While Marcus was distracted trying to salvage his career, I quietly accessed our joint accounts and transferred half of our savings into a private account in my name. Legally, it was mine as much as his, but I knew this move would infuriate him. I also dug into his investments, something he rarely discussed with me but foolishly left documented in files on our shared computer. I discovered that Marcus had been funneling money into a risky side business, a failing tech startup run by one of his old college buddies. With the help of my cousin Alina, who was proving to be a godsend, I exposed the shady financial dealings to the startup's investors. Within weeks, the startup folded, and Marcus's losses were staggering. He had no idea it was my doing. Evelyn, meanwhile, was faring no better.
The fake reviews I'd orchestrated had destroyed her credibility in the event planning world, but I wanted her to feel the same personal betrayal she'd inflicted on me. That's when I had an idea, a cruel, calculated idea that would hurt her in ways she wouldn't see coming. Evelyn had always been insecure about her relationship history. She'd been engaged twice before but never married, and she often lamented her bad luck with men. I decided to use that to my advantage. Through a mutual acquaintance, I arranged for Evelyn to meet a man, an actor I hired to play the part of a charming, successful bachelor interested in her. His name was Daniel. Well, his real name was Michael, but Evelyn didn't need to know that. And he played the role of a perfect suitor flawlessly. Daniel courted Evelyn for weeks, showering her with affection and promises of a future together. She was smitten, and I made sure to keep tabs on their budding relationship through my acquaintance. When Evelyn started bragging to me about her new man, I acted supportive, even encouraging her to pursue the relationship. "You deserve happiness," I told her, biting back the bile rising in my throat. Just as Evelyn was starting to believe she'd found her happily ever after, Daniel delivered the crushing blow. He confessed that he'd been seeing another woman all along, me. The revelation sent Evelyn into a tailspin. She called me, sobbing and hysterical, accusing me of stealing her man. "How could you do this to me, Clarissa?" she wailed. I laughed, a cold, hollow laugh that carried every ounce of my disdain. "You mean the way you stole my husband?" I shot back. "Consider it karma." Evelyn's betrayal had cost her more than just a fake relationship. Her emotional breakdown spilled into her professional life, and she started missing deadlines and losing clients. Her business was in shambles, and she was quickly becoming a shadow of the confident woman she once was. Marcus, on the other hand, was unraveling in his own way. With his career in jeopardy, his finances in ruins, and his affair with Evelyn exposed, he was desperate to regain control. He begged me to reconsider our marriage, promising to change, to make things right. I listened to his pleas with a detached calm, letting him twist himself into knots trying to win me back. "You think this is about fixing our marriage?" I finally said, my voice icy. "You think I could ever forgive you after what you've done?" Marcus looked stunned, as if he'd truly believed his words would sway me. That's the thing about men like him. They always assume they can manipulate their way out of the messes they create. But I wasn't the same naive woman he had married. I was someone new, someone he didn't recognize, and that terrified him. The final piece of my plan was a public spectacle. Marcus and Evelyn had humiliated me, so it was only fitting that their reckoning should be just as public. I compiled all the evidence I'd gathered, the texts, the photos, the financial records, and created a detailed account of their betrayal. Then I posted it anonymously on a popular local gossip forum where it quickly went viral. The post was brutal, exposing every sordid detail of their affair and its aftermath. The public reaction was swift and merciless. Marcus became the laughingstock of his industry, and Evelyn was ostracized by her peers. Their names became synonymous with scandal, their reputations irreparably tarnished. But even as I watched their worlds fall apart, I knew I wasn't quite finished. There was one final act left in my plan, one that would ensure they never forgot the price of their betrayal. As Marcus and Evelyn's lives crumbled, I felt a sense of justice, but I wasn't done yet. I didn't just want them to suffer. I wanted them to know that I was the one pulling the strings. I wanted them to feel the weight of my anger, my betrayal, and my calculated revenge. It was time for the grand finale.
I began with Marcus. By this point, his career was in shambles, his finances wrecked, and his reputation irreparably damaged. But there was one thing Marcus prized above all else:
his pride. He was a man who thrived on appearances, on being admired and respected. I decided to strip him of the last shred of dignity he had left. One evening, as Marcus sat in the living room staring blankly at the TV, I handed him a folder. "What's this?" he asked, his voice hollow. "Divorce papers," I replied, my tone as sharp as a blade. "I've already signed them. All that's left is for you to do the same."
His eyes widened in shock. "Clarissa, please, we can fix this. I know I've made mistakes, but I love you. Don't throw everything away."
I laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. "You threw everything away the moment you decided to sleep with my best friend, Marcus. This isn't negotiable. I'm done." The terms of the divorce were heavily skewed in my favor, thanks to the evidence I'd gathered of his infidelity and financial misconduct. I had Alina help me secure the best divorce lawyer in the city, someone who made sure Marcus wouldn't walk away with much. When he realized how little he'd be left with, his face turned ashen. "This is cruel," he muttered, his voice trembling. "Cruel?" I shot back. "You don't know the meaning of the word, Marcus. But you're about to."
With Marcus's fate sealed, I turned my attention to Evelyn. She was already on the brink, her business in ruins and her personal life a train wreck. But I wanted her to experience the same humiliation she'd inflicted on me, the kind that leaves scars. Evelyn had always been obsessed with her image, especially on social media. She curated every post to present herself as the epitome of success and sophistication. So, I decided to use that against her. I created a fake account posing as a disgruntled former client and began posting scathing comments on her photos and tagging local event planning groups. The accusations snowballed. Soon, other users joined in, sharing stories of Evelyn's unprofessional behavior and poor work ethic. Most of it was fabricated, of course, but the damage was done. Evelyn deactivated her accounts within days, unable to handle the backlash.
But the piece de resistance came when I sent her an anonymous package. Inside was a collection of all the evidence I'd gathered: photos, texts, and a printout of the viral post that had exposed her affair. Along with it, I included a single note: "Yins, this is what betrayal feels like. Enjoy the consequences." Evelyn called me in tears the day she received it. "You did this, didn't you?" She screamed into the phone. "You've destroyed my life." I stayed silent for a moment, letting her words sink in. Then I replied, my voice calm and unyielding. "No, Evelyn. You destroyed your life the moment you chose to betray me. I just made sure you faced the consequences." I hung up, cutting off her sobs. For the first time in months, I felt truly free. But there was one final piece of closure I needed, something for myself. I booked a weekend retreat at a secluded cabin away from the chaos. There, I spent my time reflecting, journaling, and rediscovering who I was outside of Marcus and Evelyn's betrayal. By the time I returned home, I was ready to move on. My revenge was complete, and I felt no guilt. They had made their choices, and I had made mine.
But as satisfying as it was to see them fall, I realized something important. Revenge may feel sweet in the moment, but true freedom comes from letting go, and that's exactly what I did, or so I thought.
When I returned from my weekend retreat, I felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. My revenge had been executed with precision, and Marcus and Evelyn had paid dearly for their betrayal. I thought I was ready to leave it all behind, to rebuild my life and focus on myself, but life, as always, had other plans. The first sign that the storm wasn't over came in the form of a letter, hand-delivered to my doorstep. It was from Marcus. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside, his handwriting was messy, the letters uneven and rushed, a stark contrast to the composed man I'd once known. "Clarissa, you win. You've destroyed me and I deserve it, but I can't live like this anymore. I've lost everything: my career, my reputation, my future. I'm leaving town, and I don't plan on coming back, and I hope you find peace because I don't think I ever will. Marcus." I stared at the letter for what felt like hours. The words should have filled me with triumph, but instead they left me hollow. Marcus had always been arrogant, self-assured, and utterly convinced of his invincibility. Seeing him broken was unsettling, even if he deserved it. A few days later, Evelyn called. I wasn't sure why I answered, but when I heard her voice, I knew she wasn't calling to yell or beg. She sounded defeated, her words slow and deliberate. "I'm leaving, Clarissa," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's nothing left for me here. My business is gone, my friends won't speak to me, and I can't stay in a town where everyone knows what I did." "Good," I replied coldly. "You don't deserve to stay." There was a long pause before she spoke again. I just wanted to say, "I'm sorry. I know that doesn't change anything, but I needed to say it." For a moment, I almost felt pity for her. Almost. "It's too late for apologies, Evelyn. I hope you learn from this. Goodbye." I hung up before she could say anything else. With both Marcus and Evelyn gone, I thought the chapter was finally closed. But as the weeks went by, I began to feel the weight of my actions. The revenge had been sweet, yes, but it had also consumed me. I realized I'd spent so much time plotting their downfall that I'd forgotten to think about my own future. What came next? Who was I now, without Marcus, without Evelyn, without the anger that had driven me for so long? I decided it was time to find out. I sold the house, a place that now felt more like a mausoleum of broken dreams than a home, and moved to a new city where no one knew my story. I started therapy, something I should have done long before the betrayal, and slowly began to unpack the pain, the anger, and the grief I'd buried under my quest for revenge.
Through therapy, I rediscovered parts of myself I hadn't realized I'd lost. I started painting again, something I'd abandoned after college. I joined a local art group, made new friends, and began to build a life that was entirely mine. One that wasn't defined by my relationship or my past.
One day, while browsing an art exhibit, I met someone. His name was Daniel, not the fake one I'd used in my plan, but a real, kind, and genuine man who shared my love for creativity. Daniel was patient and understanding, and he taught me that not all men are like Marcus. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to trust again. As for Marcus and Evelyn, I heard through the grapevine that Marcus was working odd jobs in a small town upstate, far from the corporate world he once dominated. Evelyn, I learned, had moved overseas, trying to rebuild her life in a new country. They were both ghosts of my past, reminders of a time when my world had crumbled and I'd had to claw my way back.
Looking back now, I don't regret what I did. Marcus and Evelyn deserved to face the consequences of their actions, and I don't apologize for ensuring they did. But I also learned that revenge isn't a solution, it's a distraction. It gave me a purpose when I felt lost, but it didn't heal the wounds they inflicted. That healing came later from within as I learned to let go and focus on myself. Today, I'm 35 and my life is completely different from what it was 2 years ago. I found peace, happiness, and a sense of self I never knew I was missing. Marcus and Evelyn may have taken a lot from me, but they didn't destroy me. In fact, their betrayal forced me to rebuild myself into someone stronger, someone better, and for that, I'm grateful.